All right, I am now going to show you how to do the double welt. You've got this pattern piece just like the one for the single welt, except for this one, you have a whole bunch more lines I'm not marking any of these lines, you'll notice. If you want to notch here and here and here and here, that's fine. This is simply showing you where the fabric is going to fold and where there's going to be some stitch lines. But it'll become clear when I just do them, what that looks like. Okay, so first thing that I'm going to do, I transferred over the box right here that has the Y. I transferred a couple of the other lines too, but mostly you just need that box. The other thing, for this you're going to use an 8x8 piece of fabric, and you're going to find a center line on it, and you're going to define that at 5 inches long. And this is the right side of the fabric. This is the wrong side of the fabric that I drew the box on, but this line that I've defined on my 8x8, this is the right side of the fabric. So this starts with your fabric right sides together. And I'm just going to line up the center line of my box with this line that I have marked on my 8x8 piece of fabric. And just like the single stitch, just like the single welt, I'm going to sew around this entire box. I'm going to do 2.5 stitch down to 1.5, up to 2.5, down to 1.5 and back stitch. And remember, you are not starting to sew at the corner because we have to slash into the corner, and I don't want a beginning and end of stitching there. When you get to the corner, put the needle down, lift the foot and pivot. Needle down, lift the foot, pivot. Change my stitch length. Change my stitch length. Needle down, pivot. Needle down, pivot. And backstitch. And now I'm going to take this over to the iron and do a bunch of pressing and cut open my welt. All right. I am getting ready to cut open and do a whole bunch of pressing on the double welt. I'm just going to cut down the middle and go to each corner, and then we'll just do a whole bunch of pressing. This particular sample, or just this technique in general, just double welts, the success is precision basically in everything. You have to be precise. On the cutting, you've got to go all the way to the corners. You've got to make sure everything is just spot on. So go slow on it. The other thing that makes this extremely successful is how well you press. So we're going to spend a lot of time, most of the time for this technique is spent at the ironing board. So be prepared to spend time with the iron. So I've just pressed this open, and before I do anything else with it, I'm going to press all of the edges. So I pressed this down, and I'm going to press this other side up. I'm not going to press so high that I unpress this other side, but then I'm also going to press these short little sides as well. So every single side of the box I press. And then comes the part that sometimes gets confusing, but you just take all of this and shove it through the hole. Like that. so that when you're done, you have a hole. So now turn it so that the wrong side is up, and you're going to press it again. And you're going to pull the corners tight so that you just barely start seeing a little bit of the front, the right side of the fabric, pop through towards the back. These just need to be very, very crisp. Crisp corners and crisp cuts, all of that make a welt pocket look great. If you don't make them very nice and crisp, it just looks sloppy. Notice I press the corners, but I'm not pressing this long part yet. What I want to do actually is open it up, and I can see the seam line here sticking up from when I sewed around the box. I'm going to press that open. And then, so that's on the top part, and then I'm going to leave it pressed open, and I am going to fold back this piece so that it fills up half the hole. So I'm not pulling it all the way back so I see my hole, the full opening. I'm folding it so that half of the opening is taken up by this fold that I've created. And I just created the first welt. If I turn this over, you'll see that half the hole has been filled in with a welt. So make sure you take time right now to make sure that it is exactly halfway filled up. This is when you make sure that those welts are perfect. Now we're going to do that exact same thing to this bottom part that has a huge flap. The pocket is included in this piece. So I'm going to fold it up so that I can see my seam allowance. And press it open. Use some steam on it. And then I'm going to fold it back, and I'm going to fill up the rest of the hole. So that the hole is completely filled up. So when I turn it over, I should have 2 welts right here, completely filling in the space. With that, I'm ready to go back and finish sewing. To finish sewing the double welt pocket, so here we have the double welt. We're going to need to figure out a way to hold these welts down so that when you pull on the top, it doesn't, or the pocket, it doesn't do weird things. So we've got to get these all held down in place. And we can do that with one nice long seam. Similar to the single welt seam where we started at the top of one of the little triangle edge pieces, came down, pivoted, went along the bottom, pivoted, and came up the other side. But with the double welt, we have the upper welt as well, which means that instead of just going around the bottom, we're going to go around the top too. So I'm going to start by pinning my welt in place so that it doesn't move on me. And I can take these out as I go around a little bit. I just don't want them to move while I happen to be working on a different side. If it's easier for you to just think about pinning this in place and then opening it up and pinning it again underneath to help it not move, that's fine too. Like whatever helps you not, so that these won't move on you, go ahead and do it. So I'm just going to pin those right there. I'm going to open up the side so I can see my little triangle, and I'm going to start at the top Go down to the bottom, pivot with the needle down. I'm going to take out these bottom pins now because I need to pull this edge back. So that I can see the bottom row of stitching. Make sure everything's exactly where I want it. So across the bottom. At the corner, leave the needle down, pivot the entire thing. So the other side. Pivot, and this is the thing that's different between the double and the single. I have to go over the top as well to hold that upper welt into place. And at the end of this, I can do my back stitch. And my double welts are finished, but I can still see through to flesh. So we need to finish that by closing the pocket bag up. And doing some other stitching. Now, this bottom part is finished, but I still need, I can still reach up really high. So I'm gonna still have to do like I did on the single welt, where I start at the bottom of the pocket bag, come to the top, go across the top, and then go down the other side. So I'm gonna start down here at 1/2 inch. Pivot. This I don't have to worry about accidentally snagging the upper part of the single welt, because I already have a welt along the top and it's already being held in place because of the stitch that I did earlier. So this is just an extra stitch that's helping keep the pocket bag where I want it. And just like with the single welt, before this step, if I had wanted to do top stitching, I would have done it before the step that I just did right there. So before I folded the pocket bag up, while it was, I could still open it up and see through, I would have done a top stitch around the edge. But that is, we can close this off up here too, just to help hold it. Before you do this step right here, if it's not going to be, if it's going to be open on the inside of the pant, I would have, before doing this top stitch, I would have come back and serged the edge here and serged the edge here to finish it off as well. You don't have to do that for this sample though. But that is how you do a double welt pocket.